Schneider is going to talk about pedagogy, methodology, and materials. Doctor.
Well, I promise not to make that discussion as dry as it sounds like it should be from the title. I know you need some good dry discussion after sitting here all morning and then having lunch. Being a public school teacher, I'm aware that you're just older. You know, there's no real difference between you and students after lunch. It's the truth. I am hoping I entertain myself with this too. I thought about how I should approach this pedagogy. I am in the classroom now, the public school classroom in Louisiana. In 2010, we were told, our faculty was told, we're adopting these standards. They're not finished yet, but they're going to be great, and they're going to be fewer, and they're going to be tied to these tests that aren't written yet, but they're going to be better tests, and the kids are going to have to know more. And it was really a pretty empty announcement because our district did not have anything for us to go on. They didn't really know it was going to happen, but they were trying to prepare us for all this greatness that was coming. And I was like, well, okay. I couldn't really react to it other than, okay, so it's coming. We know it's coming, and we're going to transition to it. And what really made me start thinking about Common Core was what happened to teachers in the state of Louisiana in March of 2012, when our legislative session began. We were upended by our legislators coming together, doing this during school hours, proposing in very rapid fashion legislation to test us using student test scores, to get rid of teacher seniority, to base our pay on how those test scores came out. All of this was hitting very fast. Teachers went to the legislature to speak, and the chair questioned the teachers, who's with your students right now? It was very demeaning, and so this happened to us. It was quite a shock. Around the same time, Common Cause had unveiled this group, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. It was a group that had been around since I was in first grade, 1973, but operating in secret. Basically, it was a collaboration, loose term, between business and legislators, where model legislation was being written and approved by business and passed to legislators to promote in state houses around the country. The legislation paralleled what was happening in Louisiana with tying teachers to test scores, their jobs to test scores. And so this happened in 2012, around the same time that we were really starting to phase in Common Core. And so I came to learn that some of the same players that were really pushing Common Core were players that were key players in ALEC. And I began just to look at what was happening. The Common Core, as we were bringing it into the classrooms, I realized, and I say I realized this came over years, that I was realizing this over a couple years. I realized that Common Core was really going to tie my hands as far as how I taught some of my students who really needed me to be able to make professional decisions, like, you know, because I'm a teacher. In the moment, my hands were being tied, and one of the standards that really hit home for me was that by the end of the year, my students were to approach grade level texts independently and proficiently. And what I was being told to do was, by the end of the year, you cannot help them. You hand the text to them, they interact with it, they discover from it, and you do what? Grade an assignment. Now I had been told, oh, it's not going to tell you how to teach, but it did tell me how to teach. And it went against all of the sensibility I have in teaching, because I've been teaching, this is my 23rd year in the classroom, 20th full-time year, and I know that I need to build a relationship with my students, for one thing, and I can't build a relationship if I'm just sitting there waiting for them to discover something, when they are more willing to discover the snack in their book bag, or their cell phone, or a nap, or a discussion with a friend, that they count on a relationship with me and my enthusiasm and my background, my sensibility about my classroom to draw them into something that they mostly otherwise would not do and cannot do. And I realized that Common Core follows the English, because I teach English, follows something called new criticism. And it tries to say that a text needs to be understood divorced from a context. And that just baffled me, how that is meaningful. My children are 15 years old. What do they have to bring to this, even of their own volition? And they're not allowed to write about that, because they have to draw out their meaning from the text. And I thought, wow, this is really bad. But I'm in a very active school district where even the folks that were promoting Common Core didn't really understand what it was telling us to do in the classroom. And so it's been sitting collecting dust on the top of my computer for a couple years now. The Common Core state standards. Because I said, you know, I need to teach my students. And now I'm under pressure that my job depends on their test scores. And I'm going to tell you, folks, that really is a crapshoot, setting your goals for the year, your student goals. Okay, well, what are we doing now? Well, your students have to make this score, a certain percentage of them, and now if their scores decrease, you get penalized for that. It's kind of a value added that they're trying to do without saying it's value added. And so, you know, my job is in God's hands anyway, so I may as well really teach. And so that's what I do. That really is it. I cannot really teach the Common Core. And Daniel Katz is a professor out of New York. He wrote a piece called Common Core ELA Standards, Can We Talk? And he really captures that well in the piece, because I am not willing to not bring historical context and help my children understand that texts are written in a context. And that as a teacher, I bring my own life context into this room. And that as a developing young person, you have a context that you're bringing to the text, completely disregarded in Common Core. And so I just had to make a decision, and I'm in a position where I can make that decision in the district I'm in. It's a very active district. My principal is not the kind of principal to try to micromanage my classroom. The assistant principal I have was a classroom teacher for years, and she values what I am bringing to the classroom. Let me tell you how I'm teaching. I finally figured it out after 22 years. I figured out how I want to teach my kids. I like to consult individually with my students, and that's very hard to do. You know, that 23, 25, 26 in a classroom. So I have built it to where while they're writing something, they draft it, they consult with me, we talk in the moment, I offer suggestions, they go and redraft it. Some of them, this is a rude awakening. I might have to draft, like, I drafted this already. Well, guess what? This is the second draft. It's called the writing process. And so as long as they go through the process, it's beautiful, because they can be terrible writers, terrible spellers, but if they're willing to stick it out and have a work ethic, and in my professional judgment, I make a judgment to push them, but not too far. You know, you have to not kill the joy of learning in the kids. And I had one young man, terrible writer, terrible speller, but he was managing to organize his ideas, and he was willing to draft and redraft and redraft, and I was so pleased. And I was happy to give him a C in the class. He earned it, and it meant something, and if someone took his writing sample and said, look what she's putting out, you'd have never captured what happened with that young man in my class, and that's just how it is. So I meet with my kids, they see me individually, one-on-one as a person, working with them on their writing. We'll take it as far as we can. I take you from where you are forward. That's the best we can do. And they value the one-on-one time. It's unusual for some of them. They move forward. They realize I am a teacher invested in my students, and through that relationship they learn, and it's beautiful. And Common Core can continue to sit on the top of my computer and collect dust. And that's where I am. I really reached a point where I don't have much to lose. Because each year the criteria for my, how I'm going to be judged changes, and how the school is going to be graded, that changes. It's all tectonic plates, so I may as well really teach if I'm going to be skating on the plates, I may as well really do my job. In order to prepare for today, I also read through standards. I went and I started at kindergarten and I started reading. Because I've been hearing, and I write a lot and I read a lot about what's going on around the nation with Common Core. And I thought, there are folks saying that the lower grade standards, kindergarten, first grade, they're not age appropriate. So I wanted to see what I might take from reading these standards. And I thought about my own experience as a kindergartner, and I still remember some of my experience in 1972 as a kindergartner in Louisiana. And I knew when I started kindergarten, I knew my alphabet, and I knew how to count to 13. I remember that. And I remember the first day of school meeting a girl who could count to 100. And I remember thinking, there's more? I remember the shock, there's more? And I know that when I was in kindergarten, I missed 45 or 47 school days from childhood illness. So that was a quarter of my school year. And I actually have the copy of my metropolitan readiness test from kindergarten going into first grade. And I know that my teacher used that to inform her judgments about whether or not I should be promoted to first grade, whether or not I could handle first grade, especially given my high absences. And I was promoted to first grade. That was her judgment. I remember in first grade having to go to the board and write the number 6, and I was like, which way does it go? And I got it wrong. I wrote it backwards. I remember this. I don't remember counting to 100 in kindergarten by 1s or 10s, which is one of the standards. And I do remember that there was a girl who could count to 100. I don't remember my teacher putting me under any pressure to count to 100. I remember we had a math workbook that we had to work out of. I think I could count to 20 by the end of kindergarten. I may have gotten a little beyond that. I asked my mother, who's had 5 of us, so it's like, okay, Mama, did I count to 100? She said, I don't think so. And I called my sister. I said, I think we went to 20. She said, I think we went to 20. I said, yeah, I think that was it. Now, my sister's an electrical engineer, and I'm a Ph.D. in stats, okay? So this whole deal that you have to reach these benchmarks or else, it really is, I could think of lots of words. You feel but I remember enjoying kindergarten. I remember playing a lot. And I know from my own studies of what's developmentally appropriate for the young grades, that play is the work. And so I thought about reading these standards that in 10-point font printed out to 7 pages for kindergarten. Now there's some spaces in there and there's some headings, but I thought, wow, how would a teacher cover this and not become neurotic in trying to cover all of this? And I highlighted some and I thought, well, some of these are dependent upon a child's personality, maturity level, and there are spectrums to maturity. It's not like every kid needs to count or read at 5. There are spectrums. 5 to 7 is reading, learning to read. I remember reading at 5. I remember we were not taught to read in kindergarten at 5, and I remember my teacher pulling me aside sometimes during playtime to read a book with me. There was no pressure. I don't remember her ever coercing me, but inviting me, and okay, yes, we'll read a book. And so it was nice, and I enjoyed learning. And I read these kindergarten standards, and I thought, boy, you are killing off the learning for the teacher and student right here. If you're going to say that students must accomplish this. And I thought of something called standards-based grading, which I first heard about from a school board member in Utah. She said, we're having to grade our students from 1 to 4 on each of the standards. And I thought, what a nightmare, what a killjoy that is for teachers. How would you manage this without giving up teaching? I mean, constant assessment, and what is the real purpose of it anyway? To try and score these children. I read one of the standards that students up to the number 20, they are to understand, up to 19, they are to understand that any number up to 19 is the number 10, which is actually 10 ones grouped together, and any other number of numbers grouped together that are numbers actually representing a certain number of ones. So I know, it gets you already, doesn't it? So the kindergartners are supposed to say, oh, that number is 15, so that is really the same as 10 and 5, and 10 is really 10 ones, and 5 is really 5 ones. And they have to show this. And I thought, how many kids who are good at math just know the answer? Because they're good. And they cannot tell you the mental process by which they arrive at the answer, especially at a young age. How did you get that? I don't know. I don't know. I have a nephew like that. Boy, I like to play with him. I'll throw out problems and say, okay, solve this one, and he'll do it. I never try to get him to tell me his mental process, because I can do a lot of mental math, and it's bizarre. When I do my checkbook math, if I try to explain to you how I do checkbook math, you'd be like, that is whacked. How do you do? But it works for me, how I manage my addition and subtraction in my checkbook. And I wouldn't presume to put that on anyone else, that you're supposed to follow my thought processes. So I think Common Core kills the joy of learning for teachers and students right out of the starting gate. If Common Core wrecks the kindergarten experience, then everything else is around the bowl and down the hole. Just flushed it. Because the pressure is on, and I was in a meeting in Lafayette, Louisiana. I was invited by an advisory board for a newspaper, pro-Common Core territory. And they said, we just want to hear the other side. Okay, here we go. I don't know what I'm going into, but I'll go. And the thought processes of the people in the room truly amazed me. Because one person said, well, yes, Common Core has been put on all grade levels at the same time now, but if for the kindergartners, if we start with kindergarten and they follow through the progression, don't you think it will work? I said, no. Show me where it's ever been tested. No one has ever tested it. And it's done wrong. If you really want to do a thing right, like a set of standards, and I wrote a piece about this, you phase in. You phase in. You start with kindergarten. You get imagine this. I know it'll floor you. You get kindergarten teachers, people who have taught kindergarten, to come in and to plan it, and then you phase it in through a pilot. You pilot, and you don't force a thing. You don't force people to follow through with the plan, because I'm not for damaging kids in classrooms. You say, okay, we were trying to do this didn't work, this didn't go, and then you negotiate it. As soon as I say a thing like that, let me add that had teachers gathered to put together Common Core, it never would have happened. Because teachers never would have locked into a set of standards in the first place. They never would, they would have said, we can't lock everybody in. And this idea that sounds so good on the surface, oh, everybody around the nation will be doing the same thing at the same time. Do you know how moronic that is? Because it's like you're assuming every calendar and every holiday and every school starts at the same time. There's an assumption that's just not going to happen. So to say, oh, if one kid moves from one state to another, they will have covered the same thing. Nothing doing. You're assuming every school calendar is the same. You're assuming that all of the classes are moving at the same pace at the same time. And unless Rod Serling is narrating this, you're not going to have that happen, and nor would I want it. Now here's what gets thrown out of the window with this idea that everybody needs to be teaching everything the same time, at the same rate, the same standards. Those standards are not etched on 2 tablets at the top of a mountain, okay? Which means if I am going to include something in the school year, I have to leave something out. Something has to go, like, reader's response theory to English, where you interact with the text. We're doing all new criticism where it's just the text. That's gone. Something has to go. And let me offer to you the idea that everybody being the same across the nation is not necessarily desirable. And it cannot be achieved. And even though David Coleman has gone public and said that no one really gives a what you think or feel, you can read that for yourself. I say that yes, we do. And we live lives in context. We live lives in cultural contexts and subculture contexts. And our lives should not be standardized across the nation. Otherwise, let's just get rid of states. Let's just get rid of them. Let's just have one big unit driving everything, if that's the way it's supposed to be. And it's not possible in a country our size. It simply isn't possible. And it is not desirable. I know many of you who would not like to live in the swamps. Anybody who not like to live in the swamps? Have your mama say the alligators went after the chickens again? To flee hurricanes. That is my life. That's my reality. And I'm proud of it, and I was raised in it, and I want everybody to have the same education I had. I went to a high school of 700, all-girls high school. The reason it was an all-girls public high school was that in 1966-67, when the mandate came down that the schools needed to be integrated, the people in my district said, you can force us to integrate racially, but not by gender. And so they split the public schools. There was a lawsuit in 1988 when schools were put back together. And so I went to an all-girls public high school, 700 students. It was wonderful. I took no exams, no exit exam. I took standardized tests, no test. I took the ACT because I chose to take the ACT. I have a doctorate, okay? And I'm completely public school educated. I was the nation at risk. I was it. We've let our schooling go down the toilet. I graduated in '85, went to LSU, went to West Georgia, went to Northern Colorado. Oh, well, you're the exception. I don't have to be. I don't have to be the exception, and I take exception with that, because if you meet kids where they are, and you cannot standardize test this, you cannot mandate it. If you meet kids where they are, if you realize that people go into teaching because they love teaching, and the teaching profession is not easy, and the people who really don't want to stay are likely going to be weeded out by year 6. They're gone. So those of us who stay are in it because we want to be. It's going to be okay, and your kid's going to get an education. Are there things I wish I could do better? Absolutely. I wish I had a class size of 12, like Exeter has, where Thomas B. Ford and former President Chester Finn and his family went, the one who's grading the standards. That would be nice, to have 12 kids. I won't even send away the 80 to 85% who apply but don't make it. I'll take everybody. Just give me 12, and boy, I can do wonders. But the reality is, it is public education, and I don't even have the largest class sizes I've heard of. I have 25. That's a challenge, and for me to meet individually with my kids, and I value that, something has to go, and sometimes it's louder in the room because I can't monitor everybody and pay attention, although my kids think I have bat sonar from what I can hear in my room. And it's just from teaching as many years as I have been. And I am invested in my teaching. I am not Teach for America on the way to my next career, my real career. I am invested in what I do. And that comes out. And I have kids come back year after year. Thank you, thank you. And I have to let kids grow up sometimes. I know, in this day and age, jobs on the line. But I have to let some of them fail. I have to. As a good teacher, you won't do your work, I gotta let you feel this, you know, and sometimes it takes coming back another year and you're the oldest kid in the room and you get the awakening. That's the reality of teaching. Common Core can't touch it. Can't touch it. Let me say a word about Common Core math. Phil Darrow is considered the chair of Common Core math. Phil Darrow is an English major, math minor. And I wrote a piece on him recently. If you go on my blog, you Google my name, find my blog, I have a search engine, just Google Phil Darrow. Phil Darrow, I watched some of his presentations on Eureka Math / Engage New York Math, which he's promoting in California. And there were a couple of very telling pieces of information that came out of that. The reason I was looking at it was our state superintendent, who has 2 years of Teach for America experience and worked to recruit for Teach for America before he was placed by Jeb Bush in the position of superintendent of Louisiana schools. He goes around and says, oh, Eureka Math, it was developed at LSU. There's been such secrecy, as Sandra touched on, secrecy around things. I said, I want to see really what is it about this Eureka Math. Well, there are 2 professors at LSU I found who were involved in Eureka Math, but they were the drones. They did not own the rights for it, and they did not have the final word regarding Eureka Math. The rights to Eureka Math belonged to a group, Common Core, which was named that before there was a Common Core, out of Washington, D.C. It's a nonprofit, Common Core Incorporated. And the final word for Eureka Math was with Phil Darrow. And he admitted that the Common Core math standards were tailored to influence the instruction of mathematics in a certain direction. Now, all around the nation, there's this uproar about the math. We're seeing different math. I saw him do this lesson with Post-it notes in math. And the kids are sitting in the audience and they're just talking about math. And he's putting Post-it notes up. He shows this to an audience in California, cuts off the video. You could hear the crickets chirping. And the parents are starting to ask questions. And you hear Phil Darrow answering, well, yes, it's going to be bumpy. You know, because it's like, well, where's the writing? Well, it's all in their heads. And so it's like, well, okay, I understand that there can be alternative math. I understand that. But when you purposely admit that you're trying to change the direction of the mathematics for the entire nation, do not be surprised when it gets bumpy. Nationwide, and in our district where parent groups, boy, did they show up time and again, and our school board is beautiful. You know why? They're invested in the community. They are not people who have won campaigns from outside money and who have come in to change the system. They are lifelong residents. And so when the parents were concerned about the math, I can't help my kid with math. My kid loved math, and now my kid hates math. The parents came forward. Our school board, our local school board said, okay, we're going to go around, we're going to hold meetings at the schools, we're going to meet with teachers. And we're going to ask, what is your experience with the math? What is your experience with the math? And then based on that, our school board said, our school board told our administration, you have to change the math. You have to change the math. The parents are not pleased with it. Overall, the teachers are not pleased with it. You have to change the math. When Common Core was introduced in 2009 through that Memorandum of Understanding, Arnie Duncan wanted to tie it in with No Child Left Behind. And he told the district, the states, you have to show that your districts want it. Well, our districts, 26 out of 69 said no. And so Arnie Duncan changed the rules. Well, okay, you can go for, race to the top. You can go for race to the top money we'll ignore what the districts want. We'll just look past that. So there are my thoughts. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.